Have you ever had that feeling, that undeniable link between, well, how you feel up here mentally and maybe a flutter or a knot down in your stomach? It almost feels like your gut has its own intuition, doesn't it? But what if that's not just a metaphor? What if it's actually a real biological superhighway? Today, we're taking a deep dive into exactly that. The astonishing and increasingly understood gut microbiome-brain alliance. Our mission really is to unpack how these two, seemingly separate systems are in this constant bidirectional chat. And critically, what happens when that vital dialogue, well, breaks down. We're pulling insights from the latest scientific literature, research trends, even industry investment shifts. We want to give you a shortcut to being really informed on this pivotal topic.
Yeah, and it starts with understanding the gut microbiome itself. At its core, it's this incredibly vast, diverse collection. We're talking trillions of microorganisms living inside your gastrointestinal tract. Just imagine, like a bustling complexity right inside you, filled with these tiny residents.
A microscopic metropolis. And our deep dive today is all about how this metropolis talks to your brain, arguably our most complex organ.
Exactly. And what's truly fascinating is this idea of the gut microbiome brain axis. You should think of it as a continuous two-way communication system. Your gut and your brain, they're constantly pinging messages back and forth. And the gut microbes themselves, plus the powerful chemicals they produce, they're major players in this whole conversation.
It's so significant that scientists have even started calling the digestive system, microbes and all, the second brain.
Hmm.
That really drives home how critical this connection is, right?
Yeah.
It's way beyond just, processing lunch.
Absolutely. And this deep communication happens through several key routes. First, there's the vagus nerve. Think of it like a direct neural superhighway connecting your gut and brain.
Ah, so that's maybe why gut feelings can feel so immediate.
Precisely. But it's not just nerves. Your immune system is sending crucial messages too, mostly through signaling molecules called cytokines.
Cytokines, right? The immune system's messengers.
Yes, and they can dial inflammation up or down, influencing everything from gut health to your mood. Then you have the hormonal system, especially the HPA axis, that's your body's main stress response system. It's constantly interacting with both your gut and brain. And finally, maybe the most talked about recently are the bacterial metabolites. These tiny byproducts from your gut microbes act as really potent chemical signals influencing your mind constantly.
Wow, okay. That's a lot of chatter going on. So if this is so fundamental, how long have we actually known about this? What's the maybe surprising history here?
Well, you might be surprised. The very first glimpses, they go way back. 17th century, Antony van Leeuwenhoek first described seeing bacteria from the mouth.
No kidding. The 17th century.
Yeah, but the field itself, understanding the gut microbes, that really only exploded in the mid-20th century. That's when scientists figured out how to actually grow these tricky anaerobic organisms, the ones that hate oxygen in the lab. Before that breakthrough, we honestly had very little idea who most of our gut residents even were, let alone, what they were up to.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit more then. We've got this incredible, intricate dialogue, gut and brain. But what happens when that conversation goes wrong, when this alliance faces disruption?
Right. When that delicate balance gets disturbed, we call it dysbiosis. It essentially means there's an imbalance in the types of microbes you have, or what they're doing, their metabolic activities. Think of it like parts of that bustling gut city are maybe overgrown, while others are neglected or struggling.
And the consequences?
Well, the ripple effects of dysbiosis can be pretty widespread. We see dysregulation of those gut-brain pathways we mentioned, changes in the permeability of the blood-brain barrier, that vital shield protecting your brain.
The BBB, yeah.
Exactly. And this can lead to pathological malfunctions that can affect both neurological conditions and functional gut disorders.
And it's so important to remember this is a two-way street, isn't it? It's not just the gut talking up.
That's absolutely crucial. Your brain can also significantly impact your gut microbiota's structure and function. It does this by regulating things like gut motility, how fast things move, intestinal transit time, secretions, even gut permeability. Your stress levels, your mood, they can literally shift your internal ecosystem.
A constant feedback loop.
Precisely. And speaking of how these ecosystems develop, it's an incredible journey right from birth. Bacterial colonization starts the moment we're born.
Yeah.
And remarkably, the initial microbes you get, they differ quite a bit depending on how you were born vaginally versus C-section.
Really? That makes a difference right from the start.
It does. And other early factors matter too. Premature birth, how an infant is fed breast milk versus formula and exposure to antibiotics around birth. There's even this fascinating recent discovery about horizontal gene sharing. Gut microbes from the mother can directly pass on some of their genetic instructions, their sort of skill sets, to the baby's developing microbiome during that early period.
Wow, microbes sharing blueprints. Okay, so fast forward to adulthood. What are the big levers then? What influences our gut microbes day to day, and can we actually change them?
In adulthood, diet is definitely a major player, probably the biggest one we can easily control. You can actually see pretty prompt changes in your microbiota composition just by shifting your dietary style.
Like how quickly?
Sometimes within days, we see specific patterns, for example, comparing people on primarily plant-based diets versus those on more animal-based diets. But beyond diet, other things influence it too.
Yeah.
Stress, definitely. Your environment, medications you take, your stage of life, existing medical conditions. It's a complex mix.
And who actually lives down there? You mentioned bacteria, but is it just bacteria?
Good question. It's a really complex community. Bacteria are the most numerous, yes, but there are also viruses, archaea, ancient single-celled organisms, yeasts, and fungi. And they're all interacting in various ways. Some cooperate symbiosis or mutualism, others compete, antagonism, some even prey on others. It's a whole ecosystem.
A microscopic jumble.
Kind of. And while the diversity is huge, about 90% of the bacteria belong to just four main groups, or phyla: firmicutes, bacteroidetes, actinobacteria, and proteobacteria. You'll find smaller numbers of others too, like fusobacteria and verrucomicrobia.
Okay, let's take that virtual tour you mentioned. Through the different neighborhoods of the GI tract, what do we find where?
Right, it's quite a journey. Starting in the stomach, it's an extreme place, highly acidic, pH around 1.5.
Like battery acid, basically.
Pretty much. For a long time, people thought it was sterile. Until, surprise, Helicobacter pylori was discovered there in the 80s, showing some things can survive. But generally, the microbial population is low, mostly firmicutes, bacteroidetes, actinobacteria,
Then moving on.
into the small intestine. The pH starts to rise, becoming less acidic as you move along. Bacterial numbers increase quite a bit, from maybe thousands per milliliter to millions or even hundreds of millions. Firmicutes often dominate in the upper part, the duodenum, but it's still a challenging place for microbes. Things move through relatively fast, and there's a lot of bile, which can be tough on bacteria.
And the final destination.
The large intestine, this is Metropolis. By far the largest microbial community. We're talking possibly trillions of cells per milliliter. It's strictly anaerobic, no oxygen, and it has the most complex diversity. Why? Well, larger volume, a more moderate pH, lower bile salts, and things stick around longer, giving microbes more time. And crucially, this is where undigested food gets fermented by the microbes to produce short-chain fatty acids, SCFAs.
SCFAs, right.
Heard of those? They're vital. They provide a significant chunk, maybe 6 to 9% of our total energy requirement. They feed our gut cells and do a lot more besides.
So with these hidden cities, how on earth do scientists study them? How do you map something you can't easily see or grow?
Yeah, that was the major hurdle for decades. Historically, it was conventional culturing, trying to grow them in petri dishes that identified maybe 400 species tops.
Well-
But the problem was, many gut microbes are incredibly fussy. They need specific nutrients, pH, no oxygen. Many just wouldn't grow in the lab, plus it was slow, tedious work.
So what changed?
The real game changer was modern metagenomic approaches, especially techniques like 16S RNA, gene sequencing, and other high-throughput sequencing methods.
Metagenomics, like sequencing all the DNA in a sample.
Exactly. These techniques have been the enabling factors. They let us identify microbes without having to culture them. Now, the estimate is over 2,000 species identified in the human gut. It gives us a much, much more complete picture.
Okay, so now we have a better picture. Let's connect that dysbiosis, the imbalance, to specific health issues, starting maybe with the gut itself, like irritable bowel syndrome, IBS.
Yes, IBS is a prime example. It's one of the most common disorders of gut-brain interaction, or DGBIs. Now, whether the microbiome causes IBS is still being debated and researched heavily, but dysbiosis, that's definitely a hallmark of the miscommunication happening in IBS. We see characteristic shifts, often reduced overall diversity, changes in the ratio of those big groups, firmicutes to bacteroides, sometimes nearly a twofold increase in firmicutes. We also see more of certain types like Ruminococcus, Clostridium, and Dorea, and fewer beneficial microbes like Bifidobacterium and Fecalibacterium.
Those last two sound familiar, often in probiotics.
They are. Which leads to an interesting point.
Ah, yes. Here's where it gets really interesting, maybe even confusing for people. The advice on using probiotics for IBS seems to be all over the place, doesn't it? Major medical groups actually disagree.
That's right, and it really highlights the complexity here. You've got guidelines from, say, the British, Canadian, and Japanese gastroenterology societies suggesting certain probiotics may be effective for global symptoms like pain. But then the American College of Gastroenterology guidelines currently advise against recommending them routinely for global IBS symptoms.
What's the difference?
It often comes down to, well, differences in the studies themselves, how they were designed, which specific probiotic strains were used, and there are thousands, the dosages, the patient groups. It makes it really hard to draw one-size-fits-all conclusions just yet. More research is definitely needed to clarify which strains help which people.
Okay, moving on from IBS, what about other gut-brain issues, like functional dyspepsia?
Right, functional dyspepsia, or FD, another common DGBI, affects maybe 10 to 30% of adults. Symptoms are things like feeling full really quickly after eating or having persistent pain in the upper abdomen. And importantly, it often goes hand in hand with anxiety and depression.
Another gut-brain link right there.
Absolutely. And the development of FD, its pathogenesis, is strongly linked to things like GI dysmotility, visceral hypersensitivity, meaning the gut is overly sensitive, and yes, dysbiosis. We see differences in specific bacteria counts. And interestingly, some research even shows differences in the oral microbiota, the microbes in your mouth, in people with FD compared to healthy controls.
Wow, even the mouth microbes might be involved.
No.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly. Stress, we all feel it. How does that fit into this gut-brain picture?
Oh, stress is huge in this context. Chronic stress is, well, a massive global challenge. It disrupts our body's homeostasis, its balance. It impacts physical health, sure, but also our immune system, our neuroendocrine system hormones, and the central nervous system.
And the gut specifically.
Yes. Acute stress, like a sudden fright, activates the HPA axis, that stress response system we mentioned leading to cortisol release. That's normal, the fight or flight response. But chronic stress, that can lead to the HPA axis becoming dysregulated. It can fuel low-grade inflammation throughout the body, and it definitely negatively impacts the gut barrier, making it leakier. It can become a vicious cycle.
So given that cycle, what does this all mean for stress resilience? You talked about this incredible connection. Could the gut actually influence how well we cope with pressure? That seems kind of surprising.
It does seem surprising, but that's exactly where some of the most exciting research is heading. The gut microbiome is really emerging as a potential biological factor that influences our stress resilience. Preclinical studies, mostly in animals so far, show a clear link between the gut microbiome-brain axis and the ability to handle stress. Specific species, like certain lactobacillus strains, have even been linked to better stress resilience.
So certain microbes might help your brain cope.
That's the idea being explored. And beyond just coping, your gut microbiota seems to be a key mechanism for modulating emotional well-being generally. It's probably no coincidence that emotional disorders like depression and anxiety frequently show up alongside functional gut disorders. The association seems very strong. There's even compelling, though again mostly preclinical, data showing that if you transplant fecal microbiota from depressed mice into non-depressed mice, the recipients can start showing depression-like behavior.
Oh.
And that effect seems to be transmitted via the vagus nerve, that direct line again.
Okay, so that covers stress and general mood. What about more severe mental health and neurological conditions?
Yes, the influence seems to extend there too. The gut microbiota has been reported to affect neurological functions along that whole gut-brain axis. Dysbiosis in common gut microbial species is being investigated as potentially playing a role in various mental health disorders.
How'd that work?
Well, remember those gut microbial metabolites? Things like neurotransmitters. Yes, gut microbes make neurotransmitters like serotonin and GABA short-chain fatty acids, certain amino acids. These chemicals can travel from the gut to the brain or influence signaling pathways, and imbalances in them have been associated with a whole range of neurological conditions. Things like Parkinson's disease, anorexia nervosa, Alzheimer's disease, even autism spectrum disorders.
That's a huge range of really serious conditions. But the big question again, is the gut change a cause or is it a result of the condition? Where are we on causality?
That is absolutely the million-dollar question, and honestly, it's still being actively researched for most of these conditions. It's complex. It's not entirely clear yet if the mental health disruptions cause the gut changes or if the gut changes contribute to the mental health issues. It might even be both, a feedback loop.
But there are plausible mechanisms.
Oh, definitely. We know dysbiosis can lead to increased gut permeability, leaky gut, and systemic inflammation, both of which can affect the brain. And certain gut microbiota metabolites can be directly harmful. For instance, increased levels of a neurotoxin called β-N-methylaminoalanine, which some gut microbes can produce, have been shown to potentially cause neurodegeneration. And as I think we touched on, there's growing support for the hypothesis that Parkinson's disease might actually start in the gut, perhaps years before the typical motor symptoms appear.
Fascinating and a bit scary.
Yeah.
Okay, so if this gut-brain alliance is so crucial and dysbiosis can cause such problems, what can we actually do about it? How can we support this connection or nudge it back towards health?
Right, the intervention strategies. There are several approaches being explored, some more established than others. Probiotics are probably the best known. They're thought to help in a few ways, potentially improving the gut barrier function by boosting mucus production or tightening the junctions between gut cells. They might also help reduce pro-inflammatory cytokines and promote a more anti-inflammatory environment.
Okay, adding the good guys, what else?
Prebiotics. These are essentially food for your beneficial gut microbes, specialized fibers usually. By feeding the good guys already there, prebiotics can increase the production of beneficial metabolites like those SCFAs we talked about.
Right, fuel for the gut lining and anti-inflammatory signals.
Exactly. SCFAs help maintain gut barrier integrity and also seem to promote anti-inflammatory responses systemically.
What about medications? Antibiotics.
Well, antibiotics obviously kill bacteria, including potentially harmful ones, and can reduce associated inflammation. But they are a blunt instrument. They can also significantly reduce your overall gut bacterial diversity, wipe out beneficial species, and, of course, contribute to the huge problem of antibiotic resistance. So they need to be used very judiciously.
Makes sense. Any more? Cutting-edge approaches.
Fecal microbiota transplantation, or FMT, is gaining traction, essentially transferring processed stool from a healthy donor to a patient. It's shown beneficial effects, particularly in recurrent C. difficile infection, but also promising results in reducing some IBS symptoms in trials. And it's moving into the mainstream. Australia actually gave the world's first regulatory approval for a donor-derived microbiome drug. And the US FDA approved its first fecal microbiota product, Microbiota, not long ago.
Wow. Okay, so that's becoming a real therapeutic option.
It is, though, still mostly for specific conditions. And then, of course, there are dietary interventions, perhaps the most accessible approach for most people. The low FODM diet is a well-known example for IBS. It restricts certain types of fermentable carbohydrates.
And it helps.
It can definitely reduce IBS symptoms for many people, primarily by reducing gas production from fermentation. But there's a potential downside. Because it restricts food sources for many gut bacteria, sticking to it long-term might reduce beneficial bacterial diversity and could potentially have negative long-term effects on overall gut health. So it's often recommended as a temporary measure, followed by careful reintroduction.
A delicate balance then. Okay, let's zoom out. Where's all this research happening? Who's leading the charge globally?
If you look at the sheer volume of research, journal articles, patents, the United States, China, Japan, and Korea seem to be major hubs for gut microbiome research related to mental and gut health.
So that's where we might expect breakthroughs.
Potentially, yes. It signals significant activity and investment in those regions. And if you look at the topics being researched, sort of the key concepts trending in publications, immunity and gut microbiome are consistently high. But what's really striking is the growth rate. The concept of the gut-brain relationship itself showed the greatest growth rate in scientific publications between 2016 and 2021.
So the focus is really sharpening on this specific connection.
Absolutely seems to be.
And connecting that to the bigger picture. Is the money following the science? Are we seeing commercial interest, investment, that suggests these ideas might turn into real-world products and therapies soon?
Oh, definitely. The private investment in the microbiome field, especially around prebiotics and probiotics, has skyrocketed. Total venture capital raised went from around $250 million back in 2014 to over $2.1 billion in 2021.
Wow, that's a huge jump.
It is. It clearly signals significant commercial interest and a belief that there are real health solutions and market opportunities in this space.
And what are they investing in specifically? Are companies and universities looking at the same things?
There are some interesting nuances. Universities and medical institutions are, as you'd expect, leading a lot of the basic science publications and also patenting many fundamental innovations. Companies, maybe reflecting market demand or quicker paths to market, seem to be focusing a bit more heavily on stress-related probiotic treatments right now. Meanwhile, universities and medical institutions are perhaps tackling more complex, longer-term research targets like depression, cognitive impairment, and sleep disorders at a higher rate.
Interesting divergence.
Yeah, and research into probiotics for those disorders of gut-brain interaction, like IBS, is generally more extensive and has a longer history. Universities focus heavily on IBS, likely reflecting its high prevalence, especially with Western dietary patterns. Prebiotics research is growing fast too, especially for IBS and functional constipation, even though fewer organizations overall might be studying them compared to probiotics. It's about feeding the beneficial bacteria you already have.
Listening to all this, it's clear this isn't just some abstract scientific curiosity. It's not just numbers on a chart. This is profoundly impacting health right now. And the research focus, the investment. It feels like a direct response to problems many of us, or people we know, face every single day. I mean, consider the stats. Something like 2 out of every 3 Americans experience GI disorder symptoms. That leads to over 100 million doctor visits annually. And tragically, GI diseases contribute to around 236,000 deaths each year in the U.S. alone. The need for better understanding and solutions is incredibly real.
Absolutely. This deep dive really just scratches the surface, but it highlights the incredible complexity, the interconnectedness of your gut microbiome, and its profound impact on both physical and mental health. And when that delicate balance gets thrown off, dysbiosis, the effects can ripple outwards, affecting both gut function and brain health through all these intricate pathways we've touched on.
It really is cutting-edge stuff. And while much is still developing, it points towards some incredibly promising therapeutic strategies for the future, doesn't it? A whole new way of thinking about health.
It really does. And perhaps a final thought to leave listeners with, something that points to the future direction of this field. It raises this important question. The focus really needs to shift, perhaps, from just looking at individual microbes, this one good bacteria, that one bad one, to truly understanding the gut microbiome as an entire dynamic ecosystem. How can a deeper grasp of the fundamental rules driving the interactions within these complex communities, how they're acquired, how they're transmitted, how they adapt uniquely to each of us, how can that understanding unlock the next generation of truly personalized solutions for health and well-being? That, I think, is the next major frontier, understanding the ecosystem as a whole.